boys. Okay, how we doing? When I say DC, you say Statehood. DC! DC! Wonderful, wonderful. So I told you about Haiti. Please don't forget that. We also want to make sure that we pray for our troops. These are difficult times, folks, and that's why we're here in this wonderful place right now. This place that has been the home to a lot of struggle, including that of statehood. And as we say, we're not only going to hope for statehood, we're going to make sure it takes place. We're going to get the House. We have the House passage of our bill, H.R. 51. Now we're going to work hard to get the Senate to do the same. Statehood now is what we need. All right, thank you, folks. Be sure to get some water. And please, folks, as you come through, be sure to leave this area clear, because right now we're being live streamed and the cameras are getting us captured, so we're trying to get this area clear. So if you can, please just go around towards the rear. We would be greatly appreciative of that effort. Yeah, and let me just real quick before we bring our next speaker, let me go ahead and say that this has been an incredible labor of love putting this together, and I want to make sure that I thank some incredible people that have put up. This took about 3 months to put together, believe it or not, and people like Vern and Shelley who are here, obviously our first U.S. Representative Charles Moreland. It was his vision to put this together, and so I thank him so much for inviting me to be part of this. We also had the Honorable Senator Michael Brown, who you'll hear from in a few moments. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and be honored with the presence of our Senator Michael Brown. I believe he is here. I know he was here a few minutes ago. Oh, here we go. All right, here we go. Our senator, who is working incredibly hard. We are so proud of the work you're doing, Senator. Thank you so much, not only for putting your foot on this to get us the permit that we now have, but also for all the work you're doing with your radio show and going on the Hill in the Senate without a vote, and making sure that we get as many co-sponsors to our Senate bill. We are so grateful for all the work you're doing. I give you the Honorable Senator Michael Brown.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're here gathered today on the anniversary of this seminal moment in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King stood on the Mall a few feet away from where we are now and told us of his dream 58 years ago. It's an exciting time for us. We know, as Dr. King taught us, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. What he didn't say, and what we have to know, is that how quickly it bends depends on how many of us are willing to stand up and temper it and make it bend. This is an exciting time for us, but we still have much work to do. You'll hear a lot of people say that we're closer to statehood than we've ever been before. And in some ways that's true. We have a statehood bill that's passed the House of Representatives, and that's never happened. And we have a statehood bill in the United States Senate that has 46 co-sponsors. But don't make any mistake, we're only at the 50-yard line. We have a lot more work to do. We've been here before. In the 1970s, we had a constitutional amendment which passed both houses of Congress and never became law. A decade ago, we had a voting rights amendment that would have given us a vote in the House that passed both houses of Congress and never became law. So we have work to do, but the path is very, very clear. The first thing we need to do is we need to remind Senator Manchin of West Virginia that he's a Democrat, and that democratic values demand that he stand with us and enfranchise the 700,000 people of the District of Columbia. Then we need to go and talk, and we can drive to West Virginia and make our point if we have to. But then we have to go and talk to the senator from Arizona and assure her, Senator Sinema, that the people of Washington, D.C. who pay taxes and fight in wars have every right to citizenship as the people of Arizona. We need to march. We need to go into the streets. I've been arrested. I've gone to trial, and we need to do more of that. And then we need to suspend the rule. We need to suspend the filibuster or get rid of the filibuster. If you cannot suspend the filibuster for something as basic as the most basic right of citizenship, representation, then the rule becomes an instrument of tyranny, and that has to end. We need a greater presence, a greater effort. There should be 50,000 of us out here today, not just a handful. So you need to get everybody you know, every neighbor, every friend, every relative, and get them to stand up for DC statehood. We need leadership in this movement. We need people that are willing to stand up and lead us to where we need to be. Your senators shouldn't be volunteers. This shouldn't be a hobby. This should be a full-time endeavor. You know that 6 other states elected senators like me, and they all territories, and they all became states, each and every one of them. The only exception to the rule is the District of Columbia, and we need to end that. We need to have a unified force, and that's what the Douglas Commonwealth Coalition is all about. It's an attempt to unify us and get us moving in the right direction. You know, Frederick Douglass taught us that power concedes nothing without a demand. A demand takes a lot of people, and we're not making a demand, and we have to do that. My favorite quote from the Old Testament is Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. This is our time, and we must seize it. So I'm going to make you a great offer. You're never going to get a better offer than this. If you help change the situation in the District of Columbia and make us a state, you will not only enfranchise 700,000 people, you will enfranchise millions and millions and millions of Washingtonians to come, because no state has ever had their statehood revoked. So once it happens, it's permanent. You know, you shouldn't be disenfranchised because of your color. You shouldn't be disenfranchised because of your income. You shouldn't be disenfranchised by your party affiliation or your political belief. And you sure as hell shouldn't be disenfranchised because of your zip code. We need to change that. The first meeting I ever had with our delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, she told me nothing is ever generated within the walls of Congress. Everything comes from pressure from the outside, and we're the pressure that we have to exert on the outside. We have to engage the Democrats. Every Republican in America stands against us, yet the Democrats don't give enough attention to this issue. They should be for 2 more Democrats in the Senate, just for the same reason the Republicans are against 2 more Democrats in the Senate. We have to convince America that their agenda is our agenda. Imagine how much more we could do with 2 liberal Democrats from the District of Columbia in the United States Senate. That's why Every Case Matters is here today, because every case matters is an issue that we care about. Global warming is an issue that we care about. Guns is an issue that we care about. But unfortunately, our voices are silenced, and we need to change that. We need to convince America. So we're a small group here today, but we need to go out on the mall as we march to Lincoln Memorial and make sure that everybody sees us and everybody hears us. So let me get you to say it. What do we want? Statehood. When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? Thank you very much, and God bless each and every one of you.
Wonderful. Big applause for the Senator Michael Brown, folks. Thank you so much. Folks, we have some t-shirts right over there, so be sure, they're all sizes, so be sure to grab one when we get ready at 10:30 to march. Now, it gives me great pleasure. You all know I'm your former U.S. representative, and we are so honored today to be joined by my replacement, who became the first Nigerian American elected to the U.S. House, and we're going to make sure that he gets a vote by becoming the 51st state. So I give you the honorable Opo Oye Owilawa. Thank you so much, Oye.
Thank you, thank you. So greetings, DC residents, tourists, activists, and everybody who's concerned about our fight for equality. Before I begin, I want us all to just take in this moment that 58 years ago, the greatest American who has ever lived delivered the I Have a Dream speech. That in 1963, millions of people were upset and hundreds of thousands of black people marched on Washington to demand better civil and economic rights. Since 1963, we've seen so much progress. We've witnessed historical elections, the integration of all academic institutions, and the emergence of black culture, not only nationally, but internationally as well. But today, we're here because we are seeing that even though we're 58 years past the I Am a Dream speech, there is so much more work to be done. Here in the United States, we are witnessing the widening of the income gap, the depth of the achievement gap, historic inequalities in healthcare and criminal justice and every type of institution that we have here in America. What I see is a product of a broken democracy. That we're here in America where the Senate has become the deathbed, the graveyard of common sense legislation. Where senators hide behind the filibuster to continue to profit from the status quo. That we have activists today that care about climate justice, income inequality, racial justice, healthcare reform, voting rights, and DC statehood. What I see to cure these societal ills is to complete our democracy. And the only way to do that is to elevate the 700,000 Americans living in our nation's capital by achieving DC statehood. And if you care about any of these issues, and you fight for any of these issues, you notice that we have something in common. The same roadblock, the same hurdle, the same few senators that find themselves in our way. Well, here on August 28th, 2021, we're gonna find a way to get them out of our way by any means necessary. While some want to go lobby in senators' offices because we don't like the way they do things, we have a little strategy of our own in DC. That we get bad service, we don't go to employees, we reach out to their bosses. So when we see Senator Manchin hide behind the filibuster, we're not going to his chambers. We're going to Morgantown, West Virginia to talk to his voters. This is an opportunity for us to raise our voices and raise our votes and bring a change. But we can only get DC statehood if we work together. So there's a two-part plan. So for all the tourists and visitors and people who care about us but don't live in DC, we need you to reach out to your neighbors. We need you to activate your elected officials. We need you to challenge all the people running for office. Because statehood is a national issue, not a regional, not a local one. For us DC residents, We have to understand that statehood is not just about voting representation. It's also our ability to self-govern, to make our own laws, control our own budget, to keep ourselves safe from lynch mobs coming down to our capital or white supremacists leaving bombs outside of our libraries. We must fight like our lives depend on this, because it actually does. As DC residents, we must also make sure that our voices are paramount in this issue. We can no longer rely on elected officials that are not from DC, that don't represent DC, that tell our story. It's our time to tell our story. When we're in the news, they should be talking to us, not just elected officials, but people in the audience that live in DC. Because this is your story. This is your fight. We're gonna make this happen. So in closing, I am Dr. Oyewolowo, U.S. Representative of Washington, D.C., and I have one more comment. Today, we don't have a congressional vote, but we do have a say. Let's use our say to get D.C. statehood. Thank you.
Thank you. U.S. Representative Oyewolowo. United, we will be a state. Divided, we will remain disenfranchised. I'm honored to call next from the Metropolitan Washington Labor Council, Diana Forrester. Diana Forrester, let's give her a big hand. Diana? Okay. Big round of applause for Diana Forrester. Show your love. Thank you, Diana.
Good morning on this beautiful, hot, bright and shiny day. I'm Deanna Forster. I'm the president of the Metro Washington Labor Council, Afl-Cio. And when we're here and we're talking about voting rights, and I looked at my sister E-Gail Holness, we used to serve as ANC commissioners together. And on my re-election, I barely made it. When I went to bed that night, there was the person who won was 10 votes over when I was an ANC commissioner. And then when I woke up, I won. After that, there was a recount. After that, they had to do what was called a casting of the lots at noon, high noon. No one knew what it was because there was one vote that kept us apart from winning. Saying all that, being reminded of that as I see my fellow ANC commissioner, that every vote matters, right? And we believe as citizens of this country that that is our access to creating the society that we want to see. And when I listen to the people that oppose DC having a right to a vote in Congress and their arguments, the arguments meaning that one, it was never meant for DC to have a vote. We were never supposed to be a state. And the people that say those things also said that me as a black woman, a Mexican woman, did not have the right to vote, should not have the right to vote. Those same people believe that women should not have the right to vote. So if we are going to continue along these lines that DC doesn't deserve statehood because that's not what the founders of the Constitution wanted for us. Or if we can continue with this argument that we can't allow DC to be a state because there are too many Democrats here. So what is the value of voting? Because voting is supposed to be our constitutional rights as citizens. It's not political. And when I hear that argument, what I remind people to say is when all of our vote counts, we all have a say in Congress, that's what democracy looks like. So I'll speak as a union leader who won a historical election for president July 2015. Anybody a part of a union? Do you know how we form our unions? Because we collectively bargain with workers against the powers that be. That's what democracy looks like. I'm also proud that those unions, over 150 unions in the DC metropolitan area, elected me to serve them as the youngest president of the Metro Washington Labor Council.
Amen, amen.
I'm honored to be here with you. We have taken this fall to Capitol Hill. The Afl-Cio endorsed statehood. Our Alaska Afl-Cio has turned out and supported statehood. In about an hour or so, we're going to see our brothers and sisters from SEIU 32BJ, 1199, Afl-Cio, AFSCME, march down this street because we're taking it to the Capitol to say that in order for us to protect our voting rights, that DC also has to have statehood. And it's not an and or. So with that being said, I'm proud to be here with you all and look forward to continuing the fight. Thank you.
All right. Give it up for this proud Afro-Latina with the Metro Labor Council. Thank you so much, Diana. And now we're going to hear from our young people. We have the youth mayors. We have Addison Rose and Lourdes Robinson. Please come up and take a minute to greet the audience here.
Good morning. My name is Addison Rose, and I am a 16-year-old junior and one of the youth mayors, as stated. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. A quote by W.E.B. Du Bois. Today I stand here amongst you all as a regular 16-year-old girl with dreams and aspirations like anyone else. Dreams of a promising future. Honestly, as I reflect upon my hopes and dreams for this country, I get a little sad. Sad because so much time has been taken from us. Now is the time it is imperative for us to take action. The one time we have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic President. The first in 8 years we have all three branches. This is now the time. Over 400 years ago, we were brought here and had no rights. It took 346 years for the first Voting Rights Act to become law, yet we still have a host of subversive tactics and bills being passed to suppress voters. There is also the pressing issue of the main reason most of us are here today, DC statehood. DC citizens pay the most in federal taxes per capita in the nation and even have a higher population than states like Vermont and Wyoming. Yet for some reason, people believe our voices don't matter. So it is time that we call senators, rally, and march. Really push to help lawmakers understand that we have a right to a voice. We have a right to a vote in the Senate, and we have a right to equality in our country. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lourdes Robinson. I am a 15-year-old rising sophomore, and I am the newly elected DC Youth Mayor. Taxation without representation. You've seen it on license plates, banners, campaigns, etc. Making DC a state is unconstitutional. What's unconstitutional is that for more than 200 years, allowing DC and its residents to have responsibilities of statehood, serving in juries, paying federal taxes, contributing to our national economy, serving in the military, and etc., then subjecting them to systemic inequality, denying them full rights of citizenship and the privileges that other Americans in other states have, such as voting representation in Congress. You can't scream democracy and exclude and disenfranchise 700,000+ people, especially our black and brown people. Understand the significance of the movement. Advocate, be at the forefront, and demand for our rights. Representation does not equate to having a representative who can propose bills and can't vote on them, then letting non-DC senators vote and dictate our livelihoods. That's unconstitutional. Today, the push for statehood continues. Let this day mark the day that we get statehood for DC. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for our youth mayor. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Mr. Gregory McCarthy with the Statehood DC Research. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Statehood now.
Good morning. It's really great to follow our two deputy youth mayors. Don't you feel good about the future, knowing that those are our future mayors? Thank you. Like you, I'm here today because I love my country, but I'm also mad at my country for denying me equal rights and justice. And that's what a good citizen does. When you're patriotic, you dissent and you speak up. Because we know, as Dr. King and others said, the powerful don't give us justice out of the goodness of their hearts. They give us justice because they feel the power of the people that want it. And that's what today is all about. I work with some businesses in the region, some employers. And in addition to you, we feel the injustice that we get with a lack of self-determination and non-statehood. But there are also some important economic and fiscal issues that we need to focus on. Let's be really clear. Lack of democracy and non-statehood is a jobs killer in this region. It's a jobs killer. It inhibits employers for hiring people and making thriving and happy district residents. And it's the private sector that's going to help sustain our economy and grow our tax base and allow our government to do the good things that we want it to. So when you're marching today, in addition to fairness and justice, also know you're marching for a stronger economy, more jobs, better city finances, and a better region to work and live in. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Gregory. Now we're going to quickly hear from somebody that needs no introduction. Anise Jenkins, Miss DC Statehood. Here we go. Anise.
Anise Jenkins, the soul and spirit of DC Statehood.
Right.
Welcome,
Statehood
Anise.
alive.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. We have a movement, y'all. We have a real movement, and it's moving. One that sustains itself, revives itself. We have strong shoulders to lean on. Those shoulders carried us thus far. We have been boosted by Julius Hobson, Hilda Mason, and others too numerous to mention who have gifted us with the movement. Some of whom you do not know, all whose names belong in the history books. Names of people who have kept us in this fight for freedom and equality, turned us from the path of taxation without representation. People who taught us that we were better than that. America is better than that. People who walked in the path of Martin Luther King, like Jesse Jackson and John Lewis. I know if we were not black or brown, we would not have to be in this struggle. But we are now seeking justice and equality that we have strongly inherited, that we now fight nonviolently with action.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anise. And folks, we've been joined by our mayor. You're going to hear from her shortly. But first, let's go ahead. We have also been honored by the presence of the president and CEO of the NAACP, the distinguished gentleman, Derrick Johnson. If you can please come up, please. Thank you.
Good morning. You know, as individuals convene on the mall, whether it's a Lincoln Memorial or otherwise, and talk about the right to vote, I think it's a key. Whether it's the John Lewis Reauthorization Act, whether it's to reverse the vote suppression methods that we've seen enacted by state legislative bodies across the country over the last 3 months. But we cannot forget and leave out DC Statehood. The right to vote is a right to our voice. And what we recognize in this city, that the residents have not had a voice. You pay more in taxes per capita than the majority of the states in the country. That you are the reason why this nation keep moving. And yet, you still lack a voice in Congress. So the NAACP for long have supported DC Statehood because we support the right to vote. We support protection of that vote. And anyone who say they support voting rights and they don't support DC Statehood, they don't support voting rights. So as we stand here this morning, as we prepare to march to the mall, we will stand in unison with you as an NAACP to say DC Statehood is a priority. It is is not a secondary issue. It is absolutely important that the residents of D.C. have a voice in Congress. I want to thank Mayor Bowser for keeping this movement alive. I want to thank Frank Smith, one of the SNCC original organizers who fought and risked his life for the right to vote. I want to thank Beverly Perry for all of her leadership, and Eugene Kinlow for keeping this issue moving forward. So whether you live in New York, or California, or North Carolina, or Mississippi, D.C. statehood is a priority. Because if it's not a priority, you don't really believe in the right to vote. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to introduce our next guest, who is the president and founder of Veterans United for D.C. Statehood, Mr. Hector Rodriguez. Hector.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been given the honor of introducing you one great first citizen of Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Elizabeth Bowser. All right? She is serving as the 8th mayor of the District of Columbia since 2015, a member of the Democratic Party. She previously represented Ward 4 as a member of the Council of the District of Columbia from 2007 to 2015. She is the 2nd female mayor of the District of Columbia after Sharon Pratt, and the 1st woman to be re-elected to that position. Let's hear that tonight. Okay. She is the youngest of 6 children of Joe and Joanne Bowser. Mayor Bowser was born in Washington and grew up in North Michigan Park in Northeast Washington. She graduated from Chatham College in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with a bachelor's degree in history, and she graduated from the American University's School of Public Affairs with a master. Now, there's something very special about this mayor. She has adopted a baby whom she has named Miranda. Let's hear it for Miranda. And let's hear it, ladies and gentlemen, for a formidable achiever of Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Elizabeth Bowser.
When I say D.C., you say statehood. D.C. D.C. When I say free D.C., you say free D.C. Free D.C. Let's try that again. Free D.C. So I want to say thank you to the Douglas Commonwealth Coalition for hosting this rally today and gathering us on the beautiful Freedom Plaza in front of the State House for the future state of Washington, D.C. We have a busy day ahead of us commemorating the March on Washington. We stand here in Freedom Plaza. Freedom Plaza inspired itself by Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King, we are told, penned that speech right here in the Willard Hotel that's behind us. We walk on streets in Washington, D.C., paved in the history of our fight for statehood, paved in our history of our fight for civil rights for all Americans. And we have a duty and obligation as Washingtonians to not only be part of that history, but to stand here and fight and stand up so that history is perfected. And 700,000 Washingtonians are enfranchised. And the only way to do that is to become the 51st state. Are you with me? I want to thank all the members of the coalition. I want to recognize the first woman
woman not only to lead this city, but to be a big city mayor of any American city. Mayor Sharon Pratt. Where is Sharon Pratt? There she is. Give her a big round of applause. I saw her. I said, we got to have Sharon Pratt. And you talking about a woman who would stand up, get arrested, and speak up for DC statehood more eloquently than anybody that I know. That is Sharon Pratt. I also want to thank all of our national civil rights organizations for recognizing that you can't talk about voter suppression without talking about the suppression of the black and brown vote right here in Washington, D.C., because we do not have two senators. So today, we're going to march, we're going to speak up, we're going to tell 100 people in the Senate that they cannot stand in the way, we're going to tell 10 people in the Senate that they cannot stand in the way of our birthright, and that is to be represented in that Congress, to have a vote in the House, and to have two senators speaking up and voting for us. So now it is my great pleasure to be able to introduce our next speaker, who stands up, speaks up for poor people across our country and make sure that we have the votes. This is an important time, people. We all are watching the news. We see what is happening in state houses around our country. It's a last gasp. That's what I call it.
That's right, that's right.
It's a last gasp to fight for white supremacy, to have deniers of our history have us destined to repeat it. So we have to stand in that breach right now to say never again, no more. We demand the vote, and we demand to be the 51st state in our union. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reverend Barber.
As I was standing there listening to the mayor, I was reminded that 58 years ago, Mayor Pratt, Mayor Bowser, not one woman was allowed to speak on the main stage. 58 years later, we got two powerful women mayors who have led and are continuing to lead this country in the way of justice. Amen. Madam Mayor and all Washingtonians, let me go straight to the matter. Isaiah chapter 10, verses 1 says, "Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights." There's been a robbery for over 200 years in America. And what we see today going on with all this voter suppression, yes, it's an attack, or a racial attack, but it's also bigger than that. It's a very attack on our democracy. If you look at these bills that are being passed, 49 states have passed them. They're passing them where you have a majority of black people, and they're passing them where you have hardly any black people, because when you look inside the bills, those bills will block 56 million Americans from using the access to the ballot they used last year. They hurt black people, they hurt brown people, they hurt Asian, they hurt Native, they hurt white people, they hurt disabled people, they hurt working people, they hurt poor people. Because this is not Jim Crow, this is James Crow Esquire. And he is after the complete silencing of the progressive voice in this country. And so we got to make sure that we talk about statehood in that moral atmosphere. Why must we have statehood? For more than 200 years, the residents of Washington, D.C. have been robbed. I didn't say a thief came in, a robber. A thief is different than a robber. A thief is sneaky. But a robber will take your rights right in front of you. There's been a robbery. You've been subjected to systemic inequality and denied full rights of citizenship that the residents of states enjoy all over this country. Now let's be honest about it. We know one of the reasons slavery One of the reasons that D.C. was never granted statehood was because of slavery. Because slavery stayed legal in D.C. until 1862. And the power forces never, even after slavery, wanted the former servants to be citizens. Citizens that had the rights and responsibility of citizenship. Washington's residents pay more taxes, according to the research, than residents in 22 states, and pay more per capita to the federal government than any other state. And yet you don't have a voting Congress. Since World War I, according to the research, D.C. has sent 200,000 brave men and women to defend democracy abroad, most of them black. 2,000 have died and never came home. And yet those that came home went to fight for other people's right to vote and came back home and did not have that right in their own city. D.C. has 712,000 plus residents. That's more than Vermont. Vermont's a state. That's more than Wyoming. Wyoming's a state. It's comparable to Delaware. They have a state. They have senators, congresspersons. Alaska, the House passed statehood a few years ago, but the non-constitutional filibuster used by McConnell and Manchin. And you know, we talk about that too limited too. Filibuster didn't just hurt black people. The filibuster blocked the anti-slavery laws, but it also was used to block women's suffrage. It was used to block labor rights. It was used to block consumer protection. It was even used to block a bill that would have guaranteed women health care and that they could purchase contraceptives with their health care plan, but the people that used the filibuster to block the women's contraceptive approved men's Viagra. Come on, the filibuster has been bad. And if D.C., why we gotta have it is because if D.C. had 2 senators, what if we had statehood? D.C. would have 2 senators, and you wouldn't have old Joe Manchin, 1 vote, being able to block for the People's Act and the voting rights restoration. He wouldn't be able to block $15 living wage that would lift 32 million poor and low workers out of poverty into higher income, many thousands of them in D.C. You wouldn't have Senator McConnell being the senator who gives corporations $2 trillion tax breaks and over $1.5 trillion during this pandemic, and who forced a bill that was passed and 84% of all the money in the first pandemic bill went to corporations. If D.C. had statehood, that wouldn't be our political reality. You wouldn't have a McConnell who will cheat to put people on the Supreme Court and not stop people from being put in graves. You wouldn't have him putting Supreme Court justices on the bench with 51 votes, but refusing to save the democracy and voting rights with 51 votes. That's what we would have. But here's the last point, because I'm a preacher that doesn't just like to curse the darkness. I want to talk about how can we? How do we get statehood? Now, Madam Mayor, I will suggest to you today that some folk, even that look like us, ain't gonna like me talking like this. But I'm gonna do what the Lord. There are 58 members of the Black Caucus. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And there are 100 members of the Progressive Caucus. And in the Senate, we got 2 black senators. Now, we have watched 2 senators, Manchin and Sinema, with 2 votes, hold up everything. Y'all see where I'm going? We watched 2 senators hold up everything. We got 58. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. black members of the Black Caucus, 100 members of the Progressive Caucus, and 2 black senators. What if those 158 members of the United States Congress were to say, you can't get our 160 votes until you do right by DC, until you pass the Voting Rights Act, until you pass the For the People's Act, until you raise the living wage to 15. You don't get your tax cuts. You don't get your infrastructure until we get our statehood. You don't get your infrastructure till we get our voting rights. Now, we will give you infrastructure. We want infrastructure too. But you can't have that and then destroy the infrastructure of our democracy and the infrastructure of our daily lives. Now, somebody say, but Reverend, that's playing hardball. Well, why in the hell everybody else get to play hardball? I think after 200 years, it's hardball time. Why do they get to play hardball and it's called politics? When we play hardball, it's called, well, we're not respecting the order. Somebody said to me the other day when I suggested this, they said, Mayor, then we won't get anything. But if the thing you get doesn't get your statehood, doesn't get your voting rights, doesn't get your living wages, what do you really have? And somebody said you have to have activist politics. And you're going to have a moral shutdown. We got to get like the street in the halls of Congress. If we don't get it, shut it down. You said, Reverend Barber, that's radical. Well, when we wanted freedom for South Africa, people protested every day in D.C. for 2 years. You can't get this stuff with one rally on an anniversary day. It took 381 days in Montgomery. From Selma to Montgomery, Diane Nash didn't come to the March on Washington. She went to Selma and organized for 2 years before John Lewis and others ever came there. And it took from January to August to get the Voting Rights Act. 8 months. The March on Washington was a day, but it grew out of the Birmingham campaign, which was weeks, and then it continued. That's why Dr. King at the end, he never said, just come back to D.C. He said, go back to Alabama. Go back to Mississippi. In other words, go back and build movements from the bottom up. So if we want statehood, Madam Mayor, we can have it, but we got to organize to have it. And we got to come together. We got to have politicians willing to play hardball politics, just like Manchin is playing, just like Sinema is playing. And we can have it if we refuse to accept taxation without representation. We can have it if we make this a moral issue. We can have it if we organize for it. Can I preach and take my seat? How did Moses beat Pharaoh? He organized for it. How did Joshua bring down the walls of Jericho? He organized for it. How did David bring down Goliath? He organized 5 rocks so he could get his cousins too. How did Esther defeat the plan against her people? She organized for it and said, if I perish, I perish. But I'm going to see the king. How did the apostles challenge Caesar? They had a Pentecost and recruited people and organized for it. How did Harriet Tubman get slaves out of slavery and build an underground railroad? She organized for it. How did Frederick Douglass have an abolition movement? He organized for it. A. Philip Randolph said it like this: it's not what people give you, it's what you organize to take. Nothing counts but pressure, 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 and more pressure. You can get what you can take, and you can keep what you can hold. If you can't take anything, you won't get anything. And if you can't hold anything, you won't keep anything. And you can't take anything unless you organize. And so it's got to start right here in D.C. Those, if you want it, start organizing. Not just on the anniversary of the march, but every day. Send the signal to those 58 black members and those 100 and progressive members. We tired of y'all telling we voted for it, but it died in the filibuster. Hold up Manchin stuff. Hold up Sinema stuff. Hold up McConnell stuff. And like Langston Hughes, D.C. has got to say, America has never been America to me, but I swear this oath that America will be. And so, Madam Mayor, since this is the chocolate city, and I know the folk around here kind of hip, let me say it like this. Let me say it like the rapper Mystical said it. It's time for D.C. to say to America and to the Congress, you keep bumping me up against the wall. But trust me, you ain't seen bouncing back yet. It's time to bounce back. It's time to fight back. It's time to march back. It's time to fight back. It's time to bounce back. I wish D.C. would stand up and say, you've been bumping me against the wall, but you ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen bouncing back yet. Bounce back, D.C., and let's win statehood.
Thank you so much, everybody. We got, in 60 seconds, we're going to line up and march down 14th Street to the Lincoln Memorial. Everybody, in the meantime, please give Reverend Barber and our mayor a big round of applause. Thank you all so very much. I also want to thank all the members of the Douglas Commonwealth Coalition. Raise your hands, and all the volunteers that helped put this together. Amen. And thank you so very much for y'all statehood supporters. I love statehood supporters, and let me announce today that this is the largest statehood rally I have ever seen at Freedom Plaza, and that is in the midst of COVID-19 and a hot day in August.
DC, 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 DC. What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? Statehood now. Statehood now. Stay.
When do we want it? What do we want? Statehood. When do